Money. Money, money, money. 1 Timothy 6:10. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, Paul writing to Timothy warns Timothy of the evils of loving money. So some people will get this particular passage a little confused and say things like, well, that money is the root of all evil. And that's not the case. It's the love of money, Paul says here. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So it's that love for money that is the source of many evils. And we can see that as we look at our lives, look at society. A lot of people end up in jail because of their love for money, or they'll end up in poverty because of their love for money. Why do people gamble? Why do people purchase lottery tickets? To win money. To win money. And you and I, we've all been in the gas station whenever somebody walks in and they'll purchase lots of lottery tickets. And you're wondering, I wonder how much money they'll win off that. And what they'll do, they'll come back in with what they won and buy more lottery tickets. And some people have a real problem there with an addiction to that love and that desire to have more money. And you've all probably heard the horror stories of people signing over their homes or signing over their vehicles to the bank at the casino, leveraging it for more money to be able to gamble further, because that next pull on that slot machine is going to be the win. That's going to be it. The love of money can lead us down a lot of paths that we don't want to go. But I have had, and maybe you have too, arguments with people, and I don't want to call them discussions because it's more of an argument. People that think that money will solve all of their problems. You know, if I just had $5,000, I wouldn't have any more problems. If somebody just, if I could get $10,000, I wouldn't have any more problems. If I could win that $1 million, I wouldn't have any more problems. What you don't realize is that that money, that desire for money, we desire money for what? Well, maybe we want to be rich. Why do we want to be rich? Because I won't have any more problems when I have money. Or I want to live in luxury. I want to be able to experience all of these things that are available in the world. But what you really get is poverty. What you really get is sorrow. What you really get is treachery. You've heard and seen stories of people who get married only to divorce you so that they can get half of your money. And that's why there are little things now called prenuptial agreements to keep those sort of things from happening. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And this is a lesson that was learned first by Achan. We see Achan in Joshua chapter 7. It's a beautiful story before that, up to that point at least, where the children of Israel are finally allowed to enter into the promised land. The children of Israel have crossed over the the Jordan River, and now they're going to attack Ai. And they do, but God gives them specific instructions. They're to burn everything. They're to destroy everything and not to take anything. And that the gold and the silver and the metals, they would be put into the treasury. Excuse me. Now we know whenever they attack Jericho, things are going to be a little different. Excuse me. I'm going to have to get my water out. They're going to be able to get a portion of the spoils of that attack. But from this battle, they're not supposed to take anything. And, well, Achan sees an opportunity to sneak some things back to his tent, and he does so, and it's quite a bit of wealth that he buries in his tent. So, Achan, while he is, his high cost for loving money is that, well, he's going to lose his life. Joshua chapter 7, look with me there, verse 1. But the people of Israel, broke faith in regard to the devoted things. For Achan the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel. Devoted things. You see, because these things were supposed to go to God. And what Achan actually did was Achan stole what belonged to God through his disobedience. His love of money caused him to disobey God. Excuse me. I'm struggling here. Give me just a minute. Let's move on down and look at verse 5. Joshua 7, look at verse 5. And the men of Ai killed about 36 of their men and chased them before the gate as far as Shebarim and struck them at the descent. And the hearts of the people melted and became as water. Well, this is how things were found out. Whenever Achan had stolen these things, no one knew about it yet. And so for the next, then they completely obliterated Jericho, right? And so now they're going to attack Ai, and they're thinking, oh, well, we can just send a few men down there and take this place. It's much smaller than Jericho. So they send just a few men down there, and those men lost their lives. And Joshua is wondering what in the world has happened. Why has God allowed this to happen? Well, God points out it is Achan's fault that these men died because there's sin in the camp. Look at verse 25. Why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord brings trouble on you today. And all Israel stoned him with stones. They burned them with fire and stoned them with stones. He, his whole family, all that he owned was put to death because of his actions. What a great loss his love for money cost in his life. Disobedience to God has love of money cost us to disobey God. Think about ways in which that can happen. Has the love or the desire to make more money caused me to disobey God by neglecting to worship God? By having to work in a position where I'm actually having to do illegal things at work in order to keep my job. There are many ways where we could do something similar to what Achan did here by disobeying God in order to make more money, to bring in more riches. Another person, and this one's one of my favorite, and I say favorite in the sense that I like the story of Naaman and Elijah, but what we're going to find here is a young servant named Gehazi. And Gehazi in 2 Kings chapter 5, 2 Kings chapter 5, Now, here Naaman has leprosy, and he went told his Lord about how there's a servant in his house who says something about there's a prophet in Israel who can cure you of your leprosy. And so he goes along with this commander, Naaman, to Elisha's house. Elisha doesn't even come to the door. Elisha sends his servant to the door to tell Naaman what he needs to do. Elisha gets upset and leaves and says, I'm not going to do this. He wouldn't even come to talk to me. But Gehazi takes it upon himself to convince Naaman. Say, look, if he would have come to the door, and if he would have said to do something more difficult, or even give him half your wealth, you would have done anything in order to be cured. And all he has said is that you need to get in this river and dip 7 times. And so he convinces Naaman to go ahead and do it. So now Naaman does it. But go on down a few verses. Look at verse 15. Then he returned to the man of God, and he and all his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel, so accept now a present from your servant. But he said, As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Then Naaman said, If not, please let there be given to your servant 2 mule loads of earth, for from now on your servant will not offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god but the Lord. In this matter may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself to the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself to the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter. He said to him, Go in peace. But when Naaman had gone from him a short distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, man of God, said, See, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian in not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him. And Gehazi followed Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running after him, he got down from his chariot and met him, and he said, Is all well? And he said, All is well. My master has sent me to say, There have just now come to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothes. Oh, Gehazi. As we continue, go on down, look at verse 25. Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. So he went on from his presence, a leper like snow. Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, who lied. He went and he took and lied to Naaman, told him this lie so that he could take those riches, that gift. Do we ever do stuff like that? Twist things to where we get rewarded whenever it was someone else that was supposed to be rewarded. I'm sure we can think of ways in which this would happen. And look what happened to Gehazi. His love for money, his desire to be wealthy, caused him and his family harm. Do you see a trend there? With Gehazi and with Achan, both of their families suffered because of their sins. See, friends, our sins aren't committed. They may be committed sometimes in secret, but they cause harm to everyone, especially those closest to us. The third one is probably the most famous of all. Someone seeking money, found in Matthew 26, verses 14 and 15. And while Achan lost a lot, his life, Gehazi lost a lot in having leprosy. Judas lost it all here in Matthew 26, 14 and 15. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. "What will you give me? How much will you pay me?" We know from earlier comments in the gospel accounts that Judas was only concerned for that money, and that he used to steal money from the treasury as the one who watched the purse. But notice that his greed for money, his love for money, was at the expense of others. He was going to receive his money at the cost of someone else's life. His wealth would hurt others. This is probably the most despicable of all, because Achan thought he would be able to sneak it and nobody would ever find out, and he would just have this wealth. And the same is true with Gehazi. He probably thought he could hide it and it would never be found. No one would know. But with Judas, someone, namely Jesus Christ, the Son of God, would immediately be impacted by what happened. So while there were casualties of Achan and Gehazi, they weren't expecting those casualties. They weren't expecting to hurt others. Judas' actions directly hurt someone, and he knew it would. Oh, I hope we don't emulate Judas in that. Seeking wealth at the expense of others. It sounds like the business world in general, though, doesn't it? Wealth at the expense of others is the opposite of Christianity. Finally, I want us to look at Acts chapter 5. Let's turn to Acts chapter 5. Another very well-known story. Acts chapter 5. Ananias and Sapphira are in stark contrast in chapter 5 to Barnabas. Whereas Ananias and Sapphira sold what they had and kept back some of it and told everybody that they had sold what they had and given all that they had, but they're hiding some of it on the side. Well, Barnabas sold a plot of land and donated all the money. Now, it doesn't say that Barnabas sold all that he had and gave all that he had, just that he sold a plot of land and gave the money from that plot of land. What's the difference? The difference is Barnabas didn't lie about it. Barnabas wasn't trying to make himself look good. Ananias and Sapphira, on the other hand, they lied to God. Beginning at verse 1, it says, "But a man named Ananias and his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property, and his wife, and with his wife's knowledge, he kept back for himself some of the proceeds and brought only a part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land? Now, was it wrong for him to only donate a portion of this property that he sold? No, and Peter's going to point that out now. While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? Why is it that you have conceived or contrived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to God." When Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last, and great fear came upon all who heard it. The young men rose and wrapped him up, carried him out, and buried him. After an interval of 3 hours, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened, and Peter said to her, "Tell me whether you sold the land for so much." And she said, "Yes, for so much." But Peter said to her, "What is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of those who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. Immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. And when the young men came in, they found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her with her husband, or beside her husband. And great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard of these things. Now this woman was probably just thinking, well, I have to lie to Peter now because I have to protect my husband. They contrived, it says, together, but he's the head of this household, and she's listening to him. And now she's protecting him. And it's cost her her life. The two of them together. It was so senseless. There was nothing necessary about any of this. They had wealth, they had money. They could have sold the property, kept half of it, and donated half of it, or whatever percentage they wanted. You know the story. I don't have to tell you, but holding back from God with the excuse that I'm giving all that I can when I'm not. That's our application. Holding back from God with the excuse that I'm giving all that I can when I'm actually not. That's what they were doing. But it went further than that with them. They were lying to everyone, particularly trying to lie to God, to say that, oh, we are giving all that we have. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Brian read for us, or rather quoted for us a moment ago, the love of God from John 3:16. How the love of God was so strong that it sent His Son to die for our sins. We talked about this morning from 1 John chapter 4 that God is love. And if we can't show love to one another, that we don't know God. The love of money is a dangerous thing, and what's happened is we get our priorities mixed up. When we ought to be loving God, we're loving the world. In 1 John chapter 2, and this is where we will finish this afternoon. 1 John chapter 2, beginning at verse 15. Here's the contrast. You see, we're tied up in the love of the world, love of money. That's what that is. That's love of the world. Why is it so bad? Well, it's because I'm focused on this. What song did Isaac sing earlier? Lead us in. What was it? This world is not my home. The love of money puts all my focus, my number one goal is here and not there. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Whoa. It's that simple. I can either, like Jesus said, love God or love mammon, money, wealth. I can't serve both. Can't serve two masters. He goes on here, John does, verse 16. For all that's in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eye, the pride and possessions, it's not from the Father, but from the world. And the world is passing away, along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. So is the love of money really that bad? Yeah, it is. Absolutely it is. If your focus has been solely on money or too much on money, it's time to reevaluate. As John says there, if our love is on the world, if our love is on the money, then the love of the Father is not in us. Love of money is going to keep us away, it's going to have us lying. It's going to have us stabbing others in the back. It's going to have us drawn away from God. It's going to take us away from the worship of God. It's going to take us away from encouraging one another and thinking about others and helping the poor and the lost. It's going to take us away from our focus on our number one and number two goals, going to heaven, bringing as many others with us as we can through teaching the gospel. So friends, avoid the love of money, as Paul said, 1 Timothy 6, verse 10. But if it's something else that's been plaguing you, you've been struggling with, Colin's got a song picked out for us. This invitation is extended to you. If you need to obey the gospel, put Christ on in baptism. Or if there's something that a decision maybe you're struggling with,